City Commission is to do what the people want the most effective and efficient way possible. So as far as policies are concerned, what policies are efficient? It's not the job of the commission to run the city. We pay people for that. If we were running the city, you should be paying us more than a couple $100s a month. Our job is to advise and to set policy. That's it. To do what you want done so that you don't have to go there and be entangled in it every day. The city commission is to be result-oriented. So when we look for efficiencies, if we set a policy and it's not efficient, the job of the commission is to go back to that policy and say, it didn't work, let's change it, let's find what works for the people of Manhattan. That's the job of the commission. When I was in Iraq, my last job was, I was over security operations for the drawdown of Iraq. And what I told them was, it's not efficient the way you're doing it. You're not putting enough military personnel on these convoys. If you increase the military personnel, you'll get your goods out of there quicker and more efficiently. And they said, no, you're wrong, but I was in charge, so we did it anyway. After we did that, I won Brigade Soldier of the Year. So you have to make the best decisions. You have to know, even in the face of adversity, if the data says it's right, your experience and your experienced leaders who you are getting advice from say it's right, then that's how you move forward, and that's the job of the commission.
So I have two parts to this answer. The first one is, I think one of the biggest things that a city commissioner can do is just propose solutions to problems. So I've lived in Manhattan going on 8 years now, and I was pretty involved in city items even when I was just at the university. And I heard the same problems over and over and over again, but it was kind of like, oh yeah, we know that there's a housing problem, but no one was actually moving or proposing any sort of solutions on it. Hopefully we'll get a question about housing, but I have some ideas to help affordable housing in Manhattan. So I think just proposing solutions to problems and being an active leader is one thing that a commissioner has to do. The second part of it, and I respectfully have to disagree with Wynn, if a commissioner is not invested in making sure city operations are efficient as possible, and that's not their place, then we have a flawed form of government from the very start. City operations are our biggest part of the budget. The way we do RFP and bid processes to review contracts is absolutely up to ordinances that the city commission sets. And so if those things need to be reevaluated and changed so that more contracts come to the city commission to be evaluated, I would be 150% for that. That is our absolute biggest budget expenditure. And if you look at cities that have saved an immense amount of money over the last few years, almost all of it has to do with a process that the city was doing that they made more efficient. Whether that's running their trash pickup in a different way, whether that's finding a way for the Parks and Rec department to save time when they're doing activities. I think Ron has done an incredible job managing this facility, and I don't ever want to step on anybody's toes, but to me, if I got elected to the city commission, I would absolutely be wasting my time and my talent if I didn't get involved with making sure city operations were as efficient as possible.
Okay. Because I'd like, if I can have that,
Yeah.
get the answer to that there. The comment there, the city manager handles operations, and it's not the role of the commissioners to do that. But we do tinker with processes, and there's a difference there. Like City University Fund, the process was not delivering what we needed. And so a few years ago, we redid that process at the commission level. So there is a level where you do that, and I think, that may be misrepresented a little bit to say, hey, commissioners, it didn't mean we don't play with processes. But we're not going to go down and tell Ron, which guy should drive a snow truck when it snows. He's paid to do that. We've got to look at processes, and I'm looking at that, we're working on right now of changing the process on pet licensing. Because right now, very inefficient. We're licensing 3,000 animals a year. There's 40,000 in the city, $300,000 difference. And we're going to get that fixed. And I'm personally working with the city staff on that. But that's changing a process. That's not going down and trying to do the job of the animal shelter. And there is a fine difference between that.
So one thing that I want to clarify about my statement is that I am by no means, I have a day job, I work 8 to 5, I have a puppy at home. There's no way that I can go down to the city building and manage any of those operations. Exactly what I'm referring to is helping to analyze and change processes like Mr. Butler was referring to. One of the things that he brought up was the fact that there's a discrepancy between the amount of animals we have and the amount of money that's coming into the shelter through licenses. What I do in my day job is help city managers communicate initiatives that they have going on in the city in a better way. That's exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about making sure that our processes within the city are effective and that we're getting the most out of them. I'm not gonna go in and spend a day with the city clerk, but Ron works for the city commission, and it's our job to make sure that the city is managed in an effective way. And if that's not our job, then again, we have a flawed government from the get-go.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure that was going to happen anytime soon. The original question is, what is the role of city commission? So I think, it's obvious that it's about budget and policy, but beyond that, I also see a city commissioner as being the ambassador of Manhattan. And when I say that, when you walk in, you're no longer Yusha Reddy or Wynn Butler or Jared McKee or anybody else. You are the mayor. And when you get called to Fort Riley, K-State, any kind of conferences, they refer you to as the mayor. They will never remember your name, but they'll remember the mayor of Manhattan was there. It can be anybody. So showing up, representing Manhattan at any kind of establishment, venue, agreements. We're working on some MOUs with the Irving Army Community Hospital on Fort Riley. That's going to be Linda Morris now, because now she's the mayor, but she's going to continue what we started. Fort Riley, all of those relationships are going to go to the mayor now. But if you don't show up at all of the things that you're invited to, you're not at the table. You can't just be at the table when you need something. You need to be at the table when you don't need something, but you're there for the cause. And that matters a lot, not only to our soldiers and our students and our families, but that means you care enough to take time out of your life to represent Manhattan. And as a teacher, I learned that I'm making over 100 decisions a day. When you have 30, 40 children teaching all kinds of concepts, all content areas in elementary education, you're not sitting very long. You're making decisions and dealing with their families, and that's a hard task to do. Bringing that to the city commission makes it even more so. Now you're representing 56,000 people, and to handle that with grace, with patience, takes a lot of work ethic. There's no 9 to 5. It's just 24/7, period. That's it. You are on call nonstop. And when you don't do something, people will remember the negative before they remember the 100 positives. So you need to be on top of your game every single day. And if you're not on top of your game, you need to find somebody who can help you answer that question. You have resources at your hand. So you are representing 56,000 people, and you need to do it every single second that they want you to be there.
It's been so long, I forgot the question. No, I didn't. I think actually I did start this particular question. So what I'm going to do is do this. Just so I can have a few words here. I want to share with you folks something that I hope you'll take to heart. I have a bachelor's degree in business, but I graduated proudly, and although I still go back to this school, to the School of Hard Knocks. Have any of you attended that school? That's from experience. And that's a school that I have learned probably more from than my bachelor's degree. It's those life experiences that I'll bring to being a city commissioner. My work day never ends in the job I have today, not because it always requires it, but because I care about it. I'm committed to it, as I will be to your city commissioner, to be your city commissioner. It is a tough job. And I'm committing to you, I'm up for it, and time is not an issue.
I do want to use my input. So I wanted to address this to refer to the travel budget that Commissioner Butler was speaking of earlier. And the reason I want to say this is, I spoke of being a teacher. Well, when I was a teacher, I also went on several conferences, professional development, all sorts of things. As a city commissioner, it's even more so. If you go to the AUSA Army Conference in DC, if you go to a town gown conference, if you go to a National League of Cities conferences, it's not just about the money. The city expects me to go beyond the boundaries of Manhattan, Kansas, and come back with ideas or build relationships with other cities, so we're not reinventing the wheel. It's about building those relationships, whether it's an interregional visit or a Flint Hills leadership retreat, whatever it might be, you're building those relationships. And all of them have been very productive. Talking to your legislators, you have to talk to them even when you don't need something. So they will listen to you when you need something. That's why those trips matter, that you took time. And it's a lot of work. You're not just perusing around and just sightseeing. It's a lot of work, and you need to dedicate yourself to that.
So I want to say more about travel. That's bothered me for years because the city travel budget is buried inside all the other ones. And if you pull them all out, it's over $250,000. And so my comment on the commission is, yeah, I understand, you know, went to the AUSA conference because I thought that was important. But there's a whole bunch of those we don't need to go to. And the one that irritated me this year was one of the commissioners went to a town and gown meeting in Eugene, Oregon, and spent over $1,000 to talk about binge drinking. And tell me how that's going to help the city. And we all know binge drinking is a problem, but going to a conference on binge drinking, you're going to come back from that and do what? Cancel Fake Patty's Day? Not going to happen. Bad investment. That's where I'm coming from.
Are we allowed to use the second one for this?
Sure. They're your cars, you get 2 of them.
Well, I have to address that because the town gown is so critical. To this town gown, and I only have 1 minute to say this, to this town gown conference, we had bill buy-in from Kansas State University. President Myers allotted enough money for 3 people from Kansas State University to go, and we did the same from ours. So that was a partnership between the university and city. So what are they talking about? Talking about sexual assault, rape, binge drinking, rentals, housing, transportation. There's a whole slew of things. So it's not just binge drinking. When you have a young woman or man out there and they need to test their drink, now we're trying to find a way they can test for drugs in their drink. This is about consequences that are, we don't want to have consequences after the fact. We're trying to work on some preventive measures. And you have to go there, get those ideas, because as a commissioner, you're dealing with zoning and potholes and housing and everything else. You need a cadre of group that's going to focus on our town gown young people. 24,000 students are here in our town. We need to see how we can help them get along in our community so that we are also having a good life as citizens of Manhattan.
Okay. Are we done with that one? I think we are.
Done with my card.
I think everybody expended their cards, okay. Now, let's go back a little bit more economic related. And no, Jared did not see this question. He made reference to a similar question just a few minutes ago, but he was not aware of this question. Okay, Riley County and Manhattan has a cost of rental housing challenge. With a 10% vacancy rate, it is clearly not a supply problem. Wages are low, cost of living is high. We also have about 350 homeless children in the USD 383 school system. Now, if anybody have any questions about those facts, feel free to see me after. I chair Social Service Advisory Board for the city, and those are all very accurate statements. Now, what can you do as a city commissioner about the high cost of housing and the cost of living in Manhattan? You're up.
Okay, well, the first thing is, you know, if you're renting a house in Manhattan, that property tax is part of your rent. And so gaining control of the mill levy is part of it. And then our sales tax rate, you know, maybe if the Parks and Rec thing passes, the sales tax rate will stay where it is. If it doesn't pass, it'll go down. And so one of the primary things is, again, it's the tax rates, both sales and mill levy, that affect the housing. Now, the good side of those vacancy rates is supply and demand. I mean, I'm a capitalist. And I know that the cost of those rentals is going to have to come down if the supply is greater than the demand. And so that's a positive thing. And part of the thing that drove the rental inspection program concept that ended up being a rental registration program was the low quality of some of those rentals. And I think they're just going to fall off the market. And so, you know, the capitalist environment is going to make some improvements on that. Now, some of the other things that, you know, the city invests roughly $1 million a year in the social services aspect, which John's well aware of, and so is Jared, been on the board for 3 years. And we can't put unlimited resources against that. And so, you know, we'll continue to do that, but I'm hoping, you know, the marketplace will address, you know, some of it in the long run.
So one of the first things you have to do is bring down the mill levy, bring down the taxes. Any smart business person is not going to absorb any costs. They're going to pass them to the consumer. So if you want rentals, the prices to go down, you have to lower the taxes that the owners are paying. because smart businessmen aren't gonna absorb those costs. That's the first thing you have to do. The next thing you have to do is allow the marketplace to work. Some of these things that they're renting, especially students, they're crap, rundown buildings that nobody should be living in. My wife and I rent, and recently we just moved, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, we just moved. And some of the rentals we looked at, we said, oh, it's $1,300 a month, it has to be decent. And then we walked in there and I was like, man, I wouldn't even put my dog in here, I don't even have a dog. I wouldn't put a dog in this building, right? So what you have to do is allow capitalism to work and allow people to say, it's rundown, it's crappy, I'm not gonna be there. Eventually, the owner's either gonna fix it, or he's gonna have to do something where he can become profitable. One of those two things are gonna have to happen. So let the marketplace work. Make sure that we have people who are on call, so if something is wrong and you're renting and your landlord is out of compliance with the city regulations, we can respond to any of the issues that you do have. But let the marketplace work and bring down the taxes.
So for the first half of my answer, I'll just go ahead and agree with what Caleb and Wynn said. I actually do think that the market is starting to solve the problem right now because of vacancy rates. I got a killer deal on an apartment this year that I would have never got when I was going